Namaste and welcome everybody to another episode of Rooted and Roaming, where we discuss issues concerning Indian American diaspora in the US. And with me, my name is Avtans Kumar, and with me we have Neerav Patelji. Namaste, Neeravji.
Namaste.
And we have our guest today, Professor Subhash Kak. Namaste, Professor Kak. Pranam.
Namaste. How are you guys?
Good, good, good. Um, just quickly, Professor Kak doesn't need any introduction, but just quickly, I will tell everybody that Professor Kak is the Regents Professor of Electrical and Computers Engineering at the Oklahoma State University in Stillwater. Professor Kak is an AI pioneer and an acclaimed Hindu philosopher. He also serves on Prime Minister of India's Science, Technology, and Innovation Advisory Council under Prime Minister Modi. So, with that, we'll start our conversation. So, Subhashji, please tell us about your journey a little bit. You are a computer scientist, you are a Vedantist, you are a yogi. I know you for a long time. I have interviewed you many times for different platforms and forums. Um, what has been your involvement with AI?
Well, I started working in AI in the mid 80s, and at first it was via the amazing grammar of Panini. At that time, in the mid 80s, I was looking at machine translation, and that's when my attention was drawn to the fact that Panini, about 500 BCE, created a rule-based algebraic grammar for Sanskrit language in 4,000 rules. And there is something which has not been equaled for any language since then in the last 2,500 years. So the whole question of how was that possible and what was the background to that achievement in what might be called general cognitive science. And Panini's grammar has also been viewed to be equivalent to the most powerful computing machine because it can generate an infinite number of sentences, which is what a computer which is trained to process words can also do, given that it has an appropriate grammar for that particular language. So this got me into further study of AI, not just from this angle, but also from the perspective of neural networks, which is um, trying to make a model of a machine based on how the brain works, because the brain consists of billions upon billions of neurons which are interconnected, and where the information is stored in the weights of the connections between different neurons. So I worked on it in the mid 90s. I found a result for training neural networks instantaneously, which was patented. And based on that, we were able to develop perhaps the very first AI search engine, which was written up in IEEE information, IEEE intelligence systems in 1999. And so an important step in the development of machines which can mimic human intelligence. But after that, my interest went into quantum computing and into consciousness by itself, which is connected in turn to Vedanta, because what is Vedanta ultimately? It's about consciousness. It's the science of consciousness. And material sciences or physics and computer science, cognitive sciences, they have all come to a frontier right now where they are wondering what lies behind the recognition or understanding capabilities of machines. And that's where you have to confront the mystery of consciousness. But that's precisely what the rishis looked at a long, long time ago. And they're amazing results, which some of which we have been able to translate into modern dialogue or conversation that is taking place in the field of AI. So it's a journey where my direct mathematical work got intertwined with Indian history, in especially history of Indian science, and has this sort of a dance between these two has continued to this day.
Wonderful. Like I said in the introduction, you're also a Vedantist and a yogi yourself. Um, so many would see this relation, this coming together of Vedantic philosophy and computer science, kind of religion and computer science as a kind of contradiction. How would you unpack this? Because it is not, as we know, all of us, from the Indian tradition perspective.
Well, religion has a certain connotation in the Western sense. Religion
Right.
from the Latin religio, meaning coming together for a certain purpose, binding together, right? But from the perspective of Mimamsa or Darshan, because these are the corresponding words we use in the Indian tradition, it's reflection on the nature of reality, which is also the fundamental objective of science. What is the nature of reality? Now, of course, Western science has proceeded in a certain direction where the distributed aspect, the atomic nature of physicality has been explored through various forces like, gravitation and electromagnetic forces and weak forces and this and that. While in India, uh, that was also explored because some of you might know that Kanada, the great rishi who is supposed to be the first rishi of the Vaisheshika tradition, Kanada also advanced three laws of motion which are virtually identical to Newton's laws of motion.
Right.
And many people don't know about it, but it's very easy. Anybody can discuss or discover it for themselves if they just Google it. And there is a interesting side light to it. Some people argue that possibly these ideas of Kannada came to Europe via the Jesuits, who were in India for about a century prior to the scientific revolution taking off in Europe. And not only did they take these ideas of physics, but they also took ideas of calculus, which was really fundamental to the scientific revolution. This was from the so called Kerala School of Mathematics, which had its own infinite series and all of that. And there's some very serious research which has tried to untangle it and find out, who were the individuals who may have taken it. And then it went to Vatican, and from there it was in circles. I'm not trying to say that Newton may not have come up with his laws by himself, but these ideas were there, they were being discussed, and it becomes easier for certain discoveries to be made if it's a part of the general consciousness. So that is one side to it. The other side to Indian knowledge tradition is that where Western science has come to now, namely, what is consciousness? And why has it come to that? Because Western science, through computer science theory, can model a computer, but then it cannot explain why the silicon computer doesn't have consciousness, while the brain computer has consciousness, right? So that's one thing. The second is the deepest physics theory is quantum mechanics. And in quantum mechanics, which incidentally, the creator of quantum mechanics, an Austrian Vedantin named Erwin Schrödinger, in his own autobiography claims that the central idea came to him from the Upanishads. The Upanishadic Mahavakya, I am Atma Brahma, gave him the idea of a function to represent a particle which is a sum of all possibilities, because this Atman is a sum of all possibilities because it's equated to the Brahma, right? So this was the central idea. And the other central idea, there are only two axioms to quantum mechanics really, was already floating around from Vaisheshika. So in any way, now that is a side story. The frontier of modern science from the perspective of computer science, from the perspective of physics, because in physics you have to ask where is the observer from or who's the observer, and from the perspective of neuroscience, where is the self sitting in the brain. You can investigate the brain using fMRI and other imaging resources or techniques, but they have not been able to find any specific location for this self. So the self is not sitting at any specific place. And that's precisely what the Upanishads or the Vedas tell us. They tell us um, that Atma is present everywhere. I already mentioned I am Atma, Brahma, or Aham Brahmasmi, that I, or Shivoham, I am Shiva, meaning I am the universal consciousness which transcends the whole universe. And incidentally, 3 years ago in 2023, I was able to take these insights and prove a mathematical theorem in a paper titled No Go Theorems in Machine Consciousness, where I showed that a machine, not a machine just of now, but a machine of the future, even thousands of years into the future, will not be conscious because of a fundamental mathematical reason. And consciousness is transcendent to materiality, which is precisely what the heart of the Vedas are. So, Vedas are really the science of consciousness. And that's where modern sciences are at the frontier of. So, this is a very interesting moment that these two are coming together, and they are coming together at a moment where the world is being transformed completely by AI. We are going to have machines which think like the mind without the Atma. So they will be doing everything that the human being does, as is already available. You have LLMs, large language models, which can you can interact with them as if they were another person. You can speak to them in whatever language you want to, and transition from one to another. You ask them to tell a joke, they'll tell you a joke. Or if you expect them to be humorous, they'll be humorous. So this leads also to the question, who am I? Who is an individual? What is a machine? And that is really the very heart of the Vedic tradition.
It's very true. Nirabji, please jump in if you have any questions.
Subhashji, the way you are explaining, the this is AI and the silicon man or the human will be able to respond the way you want. So basically, these are all the feeded information. It's not that they're gonna decide by themselves what they're gonna do or not. This is all basically a feeded information to them. So far, so it's not going to be a danger for the humanity or any person or any kids or anyone around. Is there any precaution has been taken? Is there any law? Is there any line has been written for this? Is there any rules or regulation has been decided, or it's on the way or not? Can you please focus a little bit on that?
Good point. There are two kinds to AI. One is, of course, pattern recognition, which is what you were saying, that you have put in a lot of data into these machines and they can recognize patterns. But there is another aspect, which is that combinatoric aspect of intelligence, which is where you are able to generate new patterns. It's something like that you do. I mentioned Panini's grammar. It can generate all kinds of sentences. So AI has also reached a point which is called Gen AI, which is what is causing all the big ripples in LLM technology, so that you can create new art, or it can respond to questions which are not a part of its stored knowledge. It can analyze it and then respond appropriately. And that is something that the brain also does. What's very interesting about the brain is that one aspect of it is mechanical. It is material. In fact, in the Vedic tradition, manas is also called antahakaran. It's an inner instrument. And if it's an inner instrument, it's material. It will have characteristics which can be abstracted adapted or emulated by the machine, and that is precisely what is happening. Now, that's one side. The other side of your question, which is very relevant, is that what about the harmful effects of it? Because certainly an LLM is a machine without an Atman, right? If it's a The
Mm.
Atma is what tells us that you and I and everybody else are the same within, and therefore we can empathize with others. We can have compassion for others. A machine without an Atma can be used for destructive steps. It'll have that rational ability, but if you ask it, okay, now go and destroy this or that, it'll do it. And there would be malicious agents in society who would want to do it for one reason or the other because their own minds are stuck in narrow reality, right? In past history or whatever. So they are living like robots. So this is one of the dangers, you are very right to point out, which confronts humanity, and the dangers of which have been mentioned by people that humanity needs to be careful about. And therefore, perhaps we need to have some kind of an oversight, not oversight in terms of not allowing AI to solve all kinds of problems that exist, whether they are sociological or social or engineering or scientific, but to make sure that AI is not hijacked for destructive purposes,
Mm.
which causes harm to society.
You have written a book on AI, which is called The Age of Artificial Intelligence. In that book, you have discussed some other negative aspects of AI. Would you mind telling us about some of them, please?
Well, yeah, this book, which I wrote about a year ago, and in fact, I should also mention that very recently, my most recent book is called Project Omega,
Mm.
The Future of Life in the Solar System. And in that, what we look at is millions of years into the future when the sun expands in size as it runs out of energy, it will expand in size and it will incinerate all life on Earth. And in that case, humanity will have to leave Earth and go to outer planets and perhaps even go beyond the galaxy. And so all of these questions of what consciousness is comes into that story, because then how can we use our subtle knowledge of consciousness to come to technology which will help us navigate these future challenges. But now, coming back to other dangers of AI, the greatest danger is uh, humans letting AI take control of society. See, what's interesting is that humans tend to cede decision making to machines because it's easier. And in fact, that is something that happened during the COVID epidemic. Uh, governments are also like AI. Now, that's another interesting point. Each government is like an AI, but in governments, which because what is an AI? AI has formulated rules and a program to deal with information, which is what government bureaucracies also have rules and regulations, and they deal with information. But a healthy state is one where these rules are modified. Likewise, a healthily programmed AI machine is one where from time to time you are able to adapt to changing changing conditions. But it's always possible that for one reason or the other, humanity would let AI at the government level, and likewise a single dominant state uh, take control of the lives of people all over. Like the empire of Star Wars movies. And in that case, it will lose all humanity. Any AI would lose all humanity. In fact, we see this if one were to cast one's eyes on previous history of mankind, we'll see that in many societies which are very dynamic, at a certain point, something in narrowness came in because of a rigid religion. And then after that, these societies did not adapt to changing conditions, and there was no science, etc., etc. So one could even compare any rigid, frozen way of thinking to the working of an AI. So in that sense, the history of mankind also already has a lot of lessons for what we ought to be doing in the future. So, in fact, what I foresee happening, because the other aspect of the big transformation taking place in society right now is the ongoing reduction of population, which will very soon turn into a collapse, where the world population could become 1/10 or even 100th in the next 2 or 3 centuries. If that happens, and there are wars, as different countries become more powerful or less powerful, humans, one of the normal uh, modes of behavior of being a human is to fight, to dominate. That is the asuric aspect of every
Mhm.
human being. So there will be more wars, and this will be a time, a dangerous time, where wisdom would also be required, because as populations reduce and current institutions um, give way or collapse, even universities might collapse, right? Because you won't have enough students. The banking systems would be impacted, or revenue systems would be impacted, because already, for example, let me tell you, the current data is the median age in India is 29. The median age right now in US is 39. In Japan, it's 49. As it becomes higher and higher, you have maybe only one person in the working cohort supporting one retiree, and that creates huge stresses for the banking industry, because revenues have to come in. Otherwise, how is the retiree going to have his money? So there will be all these pressures, and humanity would need all the wisdom it can have to deal with these challenges. And I think that's where the coming together of inner knowledge, which exists within the Indian tradition, the Vedic tradition, because the Vedic tradition is all about Atma Vidya. The science of consciousness is about Atma Vidya, which is inner knowledge. You need a samanvay, a marriage of inner and outer knowledge. And the outer knowledge, of course, has also brought us AI machines and LLMs and all that. And they are there to stay. In fact, we'll be using them even increasingly. Each one of us might even have a AI personal assistant. In fact, supposing I had two podcasts to do at the same time, I might use one personal assistant who would look exactly like me and talk exactly like me, who would talk independently and freely. In fact, all that is already possible. So it's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible where we are, and not everybody recognizes the significance of this particular moment in history.
Would you then suggest or propose that every AI scientist should also be trained in Vedanta? Go to the
Who,
extent of saying that, okay, you must learn some Vedanta before
who
you.
any human being who is in the search for self knowledge will arrive at Vedanta. Uh,
Yeah.
I mentioned Schrodinger's name, the one of the two creators of quantum mechanics. All of the sciences that we have right now is based on quantum mechanics. From quantum mechanics, you go to chemistry. Without that, you can't explain chemistry. And physics, you can't explain physics. Biology, everything is based on quantum mechanics. Who was the creator? A Vedantin from Austria. So, indeed, I run into people all the time in different countries. All the thoughtful people I know are into Vedanta. In fact, I can tell you a very interesting story of an American, one of the most influential people in America. One day he called me to his home in Florida, and he and his wife are very welcoming. But after we were chatting for 1 or 2 hours, his wife said, "Why don't you come over to our puja room?" She didn't say puja room. She says, why don't you come up to the next floor? And there was her puja room. And she sang a Sanskrit stotra in her American English. A lot of people are secretly on this path. And it's up to us as Indians. And this is a universal path. It it connects not just all humans, but also all life, all the pranis that we have. So we have to stand up boldly and communicate what Vedanta is to everybody, because this is where humans would be looking for meaning. Because the moment they become aware by looking at machines which do what we do, wouldn't they ask themselves, am I hollow like this machine? You know, the famous poem of T.S. Eliot, We Are Hollow Men, right? Everybody, if they're not in touch with the Atma within them, they are hollow men. They're no better than machines. So this is both a challenge and an opportunity for every human being.
Neeraj?
So I think uh, by hearing you, what I am feeling is human are in a search of the Treta Yuga again. I think because that's what it is in the Treta Yuga, that one person or the one dev can create the another dev, same it is, and they are doing what they need to be done, and slowly the human life and the science are moving towards the Treta Yuga, what we already has achieved, the Vedanta has achieved, and this is all the transformation coming from Vedanta to the modern science. I think look like the world is going that side, and we
Well,
as a Hindu, we already aware of this. We just don't know how to explain and how to practice that.
Neeraj, the Puranic model is that you have Satya Yuga or Kriti Yuga. Satya Yuga follows by Treta, followed by Dwapar, followed by Kali Yuga. Right now, we are in Kali Yuga. After Kali Yuga, the belief is that you go back to Satya Yuga. So
Pralay.
it's quite possible that all this churning that will take place in the next decades and couple of centuries, as the whole humanity reorganizes itself, and we don't need to do hard labor. Machines do all that for us, and we'll have the luxury of the kind of a luxury that the rishis had of going into the forest and nature providing all that they needed, and for them to reflect on the mystery of our existence, on which they wrote things which are absolutely incredible. You know, we forget that in the Mahabharata and all the other texts, or the Yoga Vasishta, in the Mahabharata, there is story of cloning, of embryo transplantation, right? Of space wars in the Saubha Parvan, of air travel. How did they imagine all of this? Of exoplanets, of
Yes.
many solar systems with Earth-like places. How did they imagine this? No other culture or civilization in the world was thinking about these problems. How are they doing it? Because all of this is inherent as a potential within the mind, which is an instrument. But this instrument is illuminated with the light of consciousness, which is Atma. And that light, in fact, there are two kinds of Vedanta: the classical Vedanta, the other Vedanta is the Kashmiri Shaivism, which is also Vedanta. They are the same thing. But in Kashmiri Shaiv Vedanta, Shiva is also called Prakasha, that it's the light which falls. You can imagine that each mind is like a trans receiver. You know, you have millions of TVs and they are able to put out certain information and images. Likewise, we are all trans receivers, and the light of Parabrahma is shining through us, and through our Mahabhutas and our Indriyas, it gets sankuchit, it shrinks, and then we think that we are separate. And that sankuchi operation then makes us think that Here, I am a powerful asura. I must dominate the other person. We are coming face to face with these fundamental notions, which are foundational to Vedanta, which are foundational to this idea of the Devasur Sangram. Devasur Sangram takes place at the cosmic level, but it also takes place within each one of us, because within each one of us is also materiality and freedom. And only when we struggle through it, there is a churning. Through that light shines, and that light of Atman shines. So all this, what's extraordinary, hangs together beautifully. It's totally consistent with science. It's not sectarian. It's universal. It's liberating. There cannot be anything as more beautiful than this whole system.
If you allow us, then maybe switch gear for a little bit. Um, we see the proliferation of AI all over the world, and it is the future, like it or not. It is going to be a dominant future for all of us. And India recently had a big meet in Delhi, where Prime Minister was there, and some of the world's biggest AI technocrats or other people, engineers were there. So, where do you see first? Do you have any opinion on the kind of things that went in that meet, and where do you see India, despite having or for with having all the legacy that we have, like you talked about Parnani and all those uh, scholars, where do you see India in that spectrum?
Uh, I'll speak very honestly. First of all, there are two sides to it. One is the economic side. India is the world's fourth largest economy in nominal dollar terms, and the third largest economy in PPP dollar terms. And very soon it will actually be third and maybe even the second largest economy. So all of this is in India's favor. Then another thing that is in India's favor is its demographic dividend. India's population will start declining only in about 15 or 20 years. It's still going up. Last year, India had almost 24 million babies. China had only 9 million babies. And USA had only 3.5 million babies. Germany had only 700,000. The populations are collapsing very rapidly. So Indians are educated, they are good at math. So the whole world would need Indians to man their own technological enterprises, right? So that's the good thing. And out of that good process will also come in more investments in India, which would be partly AI focused. So that's the good thing. Now, one thing that I feel sad about, as far as the Indian story is concerned, is that India doesn't have a single university in the top world 100. Not only that, India doesn't have a single university in the top Asia 50. When 50 years ago, 5 of the best Asian universities were Indian. And why has this happened? It has happened because for a lot of very complicated political reasons, India has had to make a lot of adjustments in the name of social justice. I'm all for social justice, but I think India, in order to really be in the forefront of AI, has to say that we leave 20 or 50 universities alone and let only merit be the deciding factor there. And India hasn't done that. China has done that. China has the top 15 universities which are focused on being in the top world league, and there are 15 or 20 Chinese universities which are in the top 100. This is India's Achilles heel right now, that the quota reservation system has percolated up to the colleges and universities level also. And in fact, recently the UGC rules and the fact that we are using these rules in a mindless AI kind of a manner. Okay, even if you have got 1 out of 800, in your admission examination. If you belong to the right category, you get in. When everybody else who's getting in has got 700 out of 800. This is very foolish, to use a very strong term. We must use common sense. This is not use of common sense. Let India try to help every community or every social group. That's fine. We want everybody to rise up. But it should be done with the use of common sense. Because if it's not done with the use of common sense, it'll create pressures which will ultimately prove too strong and hurt India in the long run. So, to come back to the question of AI, this is right now a weakness. And I think this weakness will persist because I don't see how the politics of this will change. And the politics of this is perhaps the tail of uh, 1/4 of all the parliament seat reserved for SC, wagging the head of the Indian political and administrative system. Because once you have such hard reservations at one level, the demand for these reservations percolates to other levels as well. And then you have the OBC, some of the most powerful communities in OBC in India, like the rulers of southern India for 2,000 years, like the Cholas and the Pandyas and the Pallavas. Those communities are also part of OBCs. So we need to, take the bull by its horns and say, okay, let's rationalize it. Let's set up a powerful committee and come up with something and still be working towards the upliftment of communities which may not have done very well in recent history in the last 200 years, but not abandon merit, because everything is in India's favor. India's economy probably is going to be number one in the next 40 or 50 years. But let's not make this task harder than it needs to be.
Yeah. Niravji?
Uh, I think this caste system, what is uh, been also introduced by some of the group in America. I totally disagree with that. It was a wrong idea, and totally agree with that. In India, it should be the focus on the social base, on the economic base kind of reservation, and they should get focus on that side, so everyone else can be get developed as well. Otanji.
Okay. So, what are uh, what are some of the uh, things that we can do other than the reservation or quota system that we have um, in India? What are some of the other one or two concrete steps we can take or India can take to get ahead in the race? Because otherwise, you would agree that, in my assessment, that India is lagging behind in AI. If AI is the future, we are lagging behind.
Well, there are two ways of looking at it. The most powerful Western AI companies do have very large research centers in India. And why? Because India is where the manpower is, and India is also where the consumers are. The Indian market will be the largest. So every AI company wants to have a foot in the Indian market. So with that, there will also be a tendency, and I think that's where the government of India will have to use its politics cleverly. And just as the Chinese 30 years ago told Boeing and other companies, okay, you can set up plant here, but this fraction of what is used in your plant should be locally produced. So we need to do some of that, and I think some of that is already being done. Companies are being asked to have a Indian component. Now that's one. The second thing is maybe for complex political reasons, um, India has decided to sort of completely uh, marry its own economic system to the Western one. You look at all the AI platforms, the ones that are being used in India are all Western platforms, like Google and Twitter or Facebook and all of that. They're all Western platforms. On the other hand, if you go to China or Russia, they have their own platforms. Now, these platforms are not very expensive to develop. The technology, everybody knows the technology, but it's the whole question of how to manage them. It's the management in which skills are required. And possibly something ought to be done in that sphere. But then, on the other hand, being an open-minded person, I'm also recognize that many of these AI companies in the West are led by Indians or have so many Indians that practically they are Indian companies. Some of the largest companies in a department out of 50 or 100 employees, you'll find 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 Indians. So in that sense, it's not bad to be integrated with the West. Good. If you have self-confidence, you say, okay, it doesn't matter. Your companies can operate, but then there should be some mechanism so that if things don't go along very well, India is in a position to also step in and use its own platforms. So some of that will happen, and there are good companies like Zoho Corporation, which has created certain applications of its own. So I think personally, I'm optimistic. I'm very hopeful. In fact, I do believe that India's path to being the second largest economy in the world is literally unstoppable in spite of all these handicaps, even if we're not able to um, untangle all of these difficulties. And of course, I'm sure in their wisdom, Indian thinkers and politicians will, recognizing all this, come up with some kind of reform and modifications, because reform is required so that without pouring cold water on the aspirations of people from communities who have been not that well off for a variety of reasons. And one forgets many of these reasons go back only 200 years. Some people try to predict back, okay, this community is poor now, they were poor for 2000 years. That's false, because until 200 years ago, until the coming of the British, India's share of the world economy was about 20%. So India was the richest place in the world. And then all of Indian industry collapsed as industrial revolution took off in America, in Britain. And so India became the dumping ground for the factories of Manchester. And therefore, our own crafts and arts suffered. And then they were the dumping of other stuff led to famines and led to the impoverishment of many people and millions of deaths. So people started imagining maybe these communities were always poor, which is not the case. And therefore, I think what is required in India is for every community, every jati has got to be proud. Okay, there was a bad period, but that doesn't mean they don't have the capacity to do as well as any other jati. We are all equal. Everybody should be proud of whatever their background is, but as Vedanta says, every human being has the same atman. Every human being has the capacity to do wondrous things in their life.
Yes. So,
One,
Professor Kak, it's perfectly you said that. The Indian knowledge, the way our brain thinking is, it's pretty sharp, pretty fast. How can we synchronize the Indian the Indian values and Indian intelligence with the American intelligence, and create some betterment of the human life. Like, is there any way that in the research and many places we can synchronize both of the energy and create something that can be a betterment of the human and this earth?
I think that's already happening. Firstly, within the sciences itself with the focus on consciousness, and then outside of the sciences through yoga, because applied Veda is yoga. Yoga is the coming together of both the outer and the inner. So with the spread of yoga and the spread of yamas and niyamas, yam and niyam, self-discipline, what the Indians who work hard work exceedingly hard, and that's why they're unstoppable. But the Chinese also work hard, the Koreans work hard, the Japanese work hard, right? But we have something which is unique, which is this whole idea of tyag, of moksha, that of not being attached, virag, not being attached to things that unfold in our lives. And with that, once you do that, then you are also able to uh, use the corresponding emotion of love for everybody, which is where Krishna bhakti, etc., comes in, which emphasizes love. So all of those things have to be spread. I think Indians are doing it pretty well through their social networks and temple networks and other networks within the West. And that's the reason why they're the most successful, not only in America, they're the most successful community, but also in Britain, also in Germany, where they have to use a new language. It doesn't really matter what the language is. Language of work is the same all over the world, or wherever. Even if they go to Japan or Poland or Korea, they do very well and become example. Now, it's quite possible that there are some centrifugal forces. With social media, there's certain bad habits which are also getting popular, and those have to be countered. So the kind of dangers that social media has in the West, those dangers also exist within India, because now metaphorically the world is flat. You have the same kind of information floating all around the world, and people getting attracted to superficiality, right? A person can spend all their life watching reels, which are very absorbing. You can watch
Yeah.
all your entire day watching reels on Instagram. So how do you impose that self-discipline? How do you teach that? And I think we have to go back to the sense of community within India, much more than here, because I think here the Indian community has been able to inculcate it through its temples. They also do a lot of stuff for the community through the school and through the lectures, etc., that they do. Sadly, in India, first of all, Indians don't even control, Hindus don't even control their own temples. They have been taken away. So the temples have had no way of reinventing themselves. Now they do an important role right now of comforting people who come there, and that's also a very important role. But more, and some universities have set up universities, but universities are only for granting certificates. They don't mean anything at all. Real knowledge of for the community, that's what temples should do. And somehow the Indian bureaucratic and political system has a vested interest in letting Indian temples remain imprisoned within the Indian system, which is very, very unfortunate. Because if that energy is unleashed, uh, I can tell you that really all this knowledge, as someone who's spent many years doing it, is so beautiful that it'll be totally unstoppable. In fact, I have a good friend who lives in Kashi, and he tells me how many people come so lovingly from all corners of the world. Chinese and Malaysians and white Australians. They come to Kashi, to Banaras, for comfort and for wisdom, and they stay there. With all humility, and Koreans and Chinese. And so we want that. That's only one element. We need humility. Ultimately, the first step to yogic wisdom is humility. That's what that still needs to be taught. If that is taught, why won't, just as you are attracted to something beautiful and powerful like the rising sun or the setting sun. This is the wisdom of the inner sun. It's it, as Ishavasya Upanishad says, it's a light which is different from the light of the sun and the moon and the stars. But it's a light which is many infinite times bigger than the light of the outer sources. And I think we need to bring that back into the open.
I want to come back just briefly. You mentioned, talked about all the successes Indians have had in this in this country, and prosperity and everything that we have amassed for ourselves as a community. But I'm also disturbed by the hate that we have been getting in last few years or so. Um, what do you what do you see is the reason for that?
You know, there are three powerful emotions. One is the emotion of love, right? The second emotion is the emotion of hate, as some countries have, like our own neighbor, and that has hurt that country. Um, Nelson Mandela had a famous statement on it. He says, "Hate is a poison that you drink to kill your enemy." Uh, so that is another powerful emotion. The third powerful emotion is envy. So why this hate directed at Indians in the US is out of envy? Because Indians are so extremely successful, unbelievably successful, that there is envy. Now, how do you meet this envy? You meet this envy by love, by embracing these people who are saying wrong and hurtful things because they are envious of the success of Indians. So what we have to tell them is that, look, we are, it's not even anybody can join us. We are all there to embrace you, and let's see how we can help you. And possibly we need to do a much stronger outreach to groups outside of it. Now that's one element. The other element of this envy thing is related to the current politics, where the Americans are also aware that economically they are about to be eclipsed by China, and that is driving a lot of the geostrategic changes that are taking place. And they piled all that fears on the inner community, which was different from them, namely Indians. But personally, I don't see that as a big thing. I think this is much more in the social media sphere than in the real world. I think in the real world, because people know real Indians, they love them because they are their doctors and teachers and friends and professors everywhere, good people, or moteliers or whatever. So they love them. But in the social media, where you're not seeing the other person face to face in physical flesh and blood, you can say things which are hurtful and wrong. But I think we need to ignore that. And some of this is also being amplified through bots based in Pakistan and China,
Yes,
according to experts. So
yes.
this may not be a real America centered thing.
Any other question, Neeraj?
No, I think we might can go for many hours with Subhasji.
Yes, yes. But I
We
think
should say Maharshi Subhasji instead of
yes.
Professor.
Yes, yes. Actually, we should use those terms. Yes,
Yes,
thank you. Yes. So, on that happy note and on that positive note, we thank you very much, Maharshi Subhash Kakji, for being with us, for enlightening us, for giving us the some in depth about the modern science and the complexities or simplicity of Vedanta, both at the same time. Thank you very much. We will continue our dialogue some other time as well as the topics develop. Thank you very much.
thank you, Subhasji.
Thank you, Neerav ji, and thank you,
Dhanyawad.
Avtans. It's always a pleasure, Avtans, to talk to you. And thank you. Really enjoyed this session.
Thank you very much.
Namaste.